Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Nice to see you all here for Rising. Hi, Lindsey.
Hey, another Monday, another chance to hang out together. What's going on? How was your weekend?
My weekend was fine. Do you know what's on my mind?
What's on your mind?
The lantern flies.
Those are those gray, red, nasty
gray
looking.
And red.
Well, they're pretty looking.
Weird looking bug. Yeah, it's not the ugliest bug ever, but it's an invasive species suddenly taking over DC. I swear I'd never seen one of these things until about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And now I see them. They're in my area. They're in Navy Yard. Now I see them everywhere. I've heard people describe trees that just the tree is moving because they're just swarms of lanternflies in them. It's so gross and awful.
Well, I've seen them for a couple of weeks now, but mostly squashed all over the street. And I feel bad because, like you said, they're pretty, but when they come flying at you, it's pretty disgusting.
You have to kill them all.
Bzz, bzz,
We have to kill them all. They all must die.
But that's actually a directive.
Yeah.
People say
they don't belong here.
They don't belong here. You got to get them out of here. Who are we blaming for bringing these things? I haven't done extensive research. You
I
don't
think
know?
the wind.
The wind. Okay.
The wind blew them here
We're blaming the wind. So is that what's on your radar or something else?
No, it is not. A little bit more serious subject, but maybe by the end of the week I'll be worked up enough on this to do a radar. But for now, something else.
Okay, what do you have?
All right, Vice President J.D. Vance and Senator Rand Paul are feuding over the Trump administration's decision to destroy a Venezuelan ship in the Caribbean, ostensibly because the ship was carrying illegal drugs. Now, let no one say that MAGA is a monoculture. Prominent conservative political figures and supporters of President Donald Trump's agenda are united against Democrats, the left, and the mainstream media, but they do frequently disagree amongst themselves on policy, particularly foreign policy. Now, this disagreement is healthy, and the more public it is, the better. I want to see my political leaders actively arguing with each other. It's democracy, it's free speech, and it's how good policy gets made. Liberals and mainstream commentators, well, they think it's embarrassing when Trump feuds with other people in public, like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But as an informed citizen, I'd rather witness the disagreement than have it take place behind closed doors. Disagreements are keeping the MAGA movement fresh and vital. They're a big reason that the current incarnation of the GOP has effectively outcompeted the Democrats, who are obsessed with gatekeeping and kicking anyone who dissents out of the coalition. But I digress. On to the substance of the debate. Now, last week, U.S. forces hit a Venezuelan drug ship alleged to be part of a Tren de Aragua drug smuggling ring. The boat was struck in open waters in the Caribbean, and 11 suspected cartel members were killed. According to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the drugs were headed for some other South or Central American shore, perhaps Trinidad. Vice President J.D. Vance reacted positively to the news, writing on X, "Killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military." Liberal X personality Brian Krasenstein replied, "Killing the citizens of another nation who are civilians without any due process is called a war crime," to which Vice President Vance responded, "I don't give a bleep what you call it." That reaction drew a strong rebuke from Senator Rand Paul, who wrote on X that it's, quote, "a despicable and thoughtless sentiment to glorify killing someone without a trial." Now look, I'm not going to tone police the vice president, and I agree that U.S. foreign policy should not generally be constrained by international law or also the laws of other countries. But I do think Vance should care, and does care, about whether attacking and killing cartel members in the Caribbean is a good idea. I also want Vance and President Trump to keep in mind their promise to the American people and to their voters in particular that the U.S. would launch no new wars under Trump. It's a key promise and a vital component of the MAGA agenda. Here's what Trump said upon winning the 2024 presidential election.
But we had no wars. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. But this is also a massive victory for democracy and for freedom. Together, we're going to unlock America's glorious destiny, and we're going to achieve the most incredible future for our people.
That was a winning message, but now we're changing the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And worse, we're speculating openly about regime change in Venezuela. Okay, now, the Nicolas Maduro government is corrupt, it's authoritarian, it's socialist, and if it falls, good riddance. It's not the U.S.'s job, however, to arrange that outcome or to become complicit in whatever follows. Moreover, the U.S. has not declared war on Venezuela. The cartels are criminal associations, and we can disrupt their activities to the extent they are affecting U.S. citizens. But should we really go around wiping them out when they're involved in disputes that have nothing to do with us? Now, Trump still seems to be on solid ground here and is actually downplaying the idea of regime change in Venezuela currently, which is a good thing. It's a relief. He should stick to that. The administration should also back off some of this tough guy rhetoric. I know it's super base to call it the Department of War or to say I don't give a bleep in response to a legitimate question about constraints on government power, but come on. There's sounding like a tough guy, and then there's acting like a tough guy. It behooves our leaders to know the difference. What Rand Paul understands is that U.S. citizens are best served by a policy of not overly involving ourselves in the affairs of other countries. Further, drug smugglers would actually love if we prosecuted the drug war even more aggressively because it makes the demand for their drugs even higher. We can't bomb or kill our way to victory in the drug war. If we could, we would have won it 40 years ago. So while I'm not shedding any tears on behalf of dead cartel thugs, good riddance, it's nevertheless important to remain wary about the prospect of the U.S. becoming embroiled in yet another disastrous overseas intervention. Now, Vance had the right instincts on this when it came to the Houthis in Yemen, and he sounded a note of caution when other people in the administration wanted to strike them. This is a similar situation. In fact, it's more dubious since we struck the Houthis in response to them actually attacking us. As always, America first.
You said a lot of buts in there. America first, but Trump is changing his tune, and it's.
Well, I was mildly criticizing.
Well, and I appreciate that. But the thing is, you're saying that there's criticism from liberals saying you guys have, or not you guys, Republicans have some kind of divisiveness in their party, and it's embarrassing. I would say the fact that it's embarrassing is that Trump ran on being the anti-war president and wants to change the entire department to be called the Department of War. I would say that it's embarrassing that he wants to be the anti-war president, but entered into a war on behalf of Israel with Iran for 12 days that nobody really wanted, including Democrats. I would say that it's embarrassing that he put this counter-narcotics mission as a counter-terrorism mission just so that he can bomb a Venezuelan ship and kill people, and under international and domestic law that would be considered a war crime. And so I would say he's using all these words and terms to be more warlike when he ran on something totally different. So that would be the problem that would be more embarrassing than actual Republicans calling him out for it. I applaud Marjorie Taylor Greene, Rand Paul, anybody, Thomas Massey, who can say this is not what you ran on. I mean, Trump had three things that were pillars in his campaign. First was the economy. We know that. Second was immigration. He's going to solve that. And the third was staying out of the war that he called a disaster for Biden. I mean, and Biden didn't start them, but Afghanistan, he said, this was a disaster. I would never be involved in this. I'm anti-war. They call me the war president. You played the soundbite. So I think, President Trump is not living up to, or his administration is not living up to the things they said they were going to do in a variety of ways, including with immigration and people feeling like it's too harsh the way he's going about it, not just getting criminals out of the country. So I think, it's not about the disagreements within the party. It's about completely abandoning what you ran on and told the country you were going to accomplish and kind of changing tune while we're 9 months in. I think that is a fair criticism for people outside of the party to look in and say, wait, what's the strategy again? Or what are the pillars that you ran on that you're going to uplift for the next 4 years? Because if you think about it, this is still very early in his presidency. And we've already did too much warlike actions.
Yeah, this is an area of relative agreement between us. You were putting it a little bit more harshly than I think I did on my radar, but I think it shows the seduction of becoming involved in war as a guiding principle for the U.S. government, regardless of who's in charge. We seem inclined toward interventionism, despite a clear directive from the American people time and time again not to pursue these courses of action, and Trump being more rhetorically committed to restraint than most other presidents in my lifetime. Nevertheless, can be drawn into conflicts. So I would warn the administration to play back their own clips of them talking about this kind of stuff. If they rename the department and then don't do anything, fine. I don't care what it's called, but it's just okay, you're renaming the department, and we're kind of talking about regime change in Venezuela, and we did the Iran thing. This is sounding like the old neocon playbook to me.
Yes.
And I think they should keep that in mind. Listen to me more and listen to Rand Paul more.
Listen to Robby. So President Trump appears to be threatening to extend his federal takeover to Chicago. Here's how city leaders and residents are responding. That's up next. We'll be right back. President Trump threatening to send federal immigration enforcement to sanctuary cities this week, putting many on edge over the weekend, but none quite as much as Chicago.
Trump posted on Truth Social over the weekend, trolling the city and hinting at a federal deployment. The president referenced Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 war flick, Apocalypse Now. It's a great movie. Posting this AI-generated photo of himself in a cavalry hat in front of an apparently burning Chicago skyline with the text, chipocalypse now, I guess, and continued the reference, writing, "I love the smell of deportations in the morning," which is a paraphrase of a famous line from that movie. Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War. That post prompted swift rebukes from city and state leaders. Senator Tammy Duckworth, a veteran, posting to X, "Take off that cavalry hat, you draft dodger. You didn't earn the right to wear it. Stolen valor at its worst." And Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker posted, "The President of the United States is threatening to go to war with an American city. This is not a joke. This is not normal. Donald Trump isn't a strong man. He's a scared man. Illinois won't be intimidated by a wannabe dictator." But amid the Democratic outrage, President Trump insisted he's not declaring war on Chicago. Take a listen.
We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
So Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson took it a step further over the weekend, deploying the city's fleet of snowplows to block or slow ice from entering the city. But many in Chicago say they're concerned about the introduction of immigration enforcement, that it could be a prologue to federal takeover like the one in D.C. Now, Mayor Johnson, writing on X in part, "The president's threats are beneath the honor of our nation. But the reality is that he wants to occupy our city and break our Constitution." Trump border czar Tom Homan told Jake Tapper Sunday deploying the National Guard is not off the table.
The National Guard are always on the table. We use them in Los Angeles and we use them in Washington, D.C. They're a force multiplier.
And protesters in the city on Saturday seem to feel a federal occupation is not necessary. Take a look.
Chicago is not the narrative that people try and paint it as, and so hearing Trump try and use the city to distract from the issues and problems that everyone around the country is facing that he should be doing something about is really disheartening.
How can you post an AI joke image when people in Chicago are genuinely concerned, as we just showed? And this is what I'm talking about when it's like stuff is funny, but then certain stuff is not funny. Like there's an active debate with people within your party, including Megyn Kelly, who I'll talk about later on in the D Block and share her exact soundbite. But she said on her own podcast, this is unconstitutional. Even his biggest supporters are saying you can't just send federal troops into Chicago randomly because you feel like it. D.C. is a caveat to all the rules, right, unlike other U.S. cities. But Chicago is not. And what he did in L.A. was found to be illegal recently.
And that was in response to rioting, which I think is a legitimate reason to send in the National Guard, as opposed to just, I mean, this is sad, but garden variety crime is a problem Chicago should be dealing with, right? My point of view on this would be, why is it the National Guard's job? Why do the taxpayers of the rest of the country have to sort out Chicago's mess? That is on Chicago's governance to take care of. And if the people don't think their leaders are doing a good job, and they're not doing a good job, Brandon Johnson is terrible, they should vote in different people, maybe Republicans, to take care of it. It's not Trump's problem, the National Guard. So I agree, but probably for a different reason. In terms of that that image from Apocalypse Now,
come on now, Rob.
It's
come
a little.
Now.
No,
it's not right.
I'm going to agree with you. It gives the impression that declaring war on the city is not, it's part of the United States. We shouldn't be going to war with it's again, like changing the Department of Defense to the Department of War, it's a kind of boomer, tough guy, cringy, like, I'm going to get off my, like grouchy old man, kind of like it sounds cool and tough, but it's just content. And I'm getting really annoyed with the administration's love of creating content and memes, super based, awesome, but not doing anything. Shut up and stop tweeting about it and actually do it if you're going to do it. Now, in this case, I don't think they should send in federal troops if it's not wanted by the city, and the city, in my view, would absolutely benefit from federal troops being sent in, just as our streets have benefited from the presence of law enforcement that dropped our violent crime rate and our carjacking rate and our murder rate dramatically. I know they're just standing around doing nothing, and everyone's like, I can't believe they're just standing around doing nothing. They're standing around doing nothing to deter gangs of teenagers from attacking people, which has been successful. It's worked. It would probably work in Chicago too. It's probably a great idea. But if they don't want it, if they don't want help,
let's
then
put
fine.
Band-Aids all over the country instead of working with law enforcement locally.
Let's put Band-Aids instead of letting the cities bleed out.
Well, here's the thing.
But they don't want.
I want to mark today's show down because of how much we've agreed in these first 15 minutes. So everybody mark the calendar for today's show because this is one of my favorites.
I mean, I don't defend everything Trump does,
and I appreciate that. So I just think the meme, like you said, I agree. We already talked about that. But I think it's just government overreach and a lack of respect for local authorities. And a pillar of what Republicans stand for is to allow autonomy within states and cities. And what we've seen, like in Hurricane Katrina, they asked the federal government for assistance when there was rioting and looting. In LA, they did not. In Chicago, they are not asking. And what was interesting, I watched an interview with Wes Moore in Baltimore, and he was saying, listen, I would welcome federal help. I would welcome a collaborative effort with President Trump and sit down with him. Don Lemon actually interviewed him a few days ago. I would welcome all of that help. What I don't want is being strong-armed. Yes, my friend Don Lemon. So, but he doesn't want to get strong-armed into cooperation. That's not how you solve things permanently. And even though the federal authorities, yes, it's true, have brought down crime in D.C., have not brought it down to 100% as Trump has been claiming. Right. That would mean 0 cases of crime. It's not true. But they brought it down. That's true. But it's still a Band-Aid. What's the long-term solution? Because what you did is push homeless people out of the city. What you did is stop crime because there's federal authorities. Yes, but then they're going to come right back when federal authorities leave.
Keep them out.
No, what's the plan? They're just in Virginia and Maryland now. You just push them out, or they're in temporary homeless shelters. What is the long-term plan? You have to worry about community policing,
housing. The plan for mentally insane people on the streets is to put them in facilities. That's the long.
Okay, but
plan.
The facilities don't even have the capacity to house all the people
they
that are
have
on the street that you're calling mentally ill.
Just don't have the political will to keep them.
Okay, well, funding's required in collaboration. I think
we spend millions.
And I think President Trump should consider reallocating funding to how mayors and governors see best, rather than just making decisions that no one wants. The people who live there, the Americans that voted him in, some of them are Republican. I'm assuming all over Chicago, do not want him there. So don't make decisions.
Well, a lot of these big cities just don't have the money to do that because they spend like drunken sailors because they're socialists. That's Brandon Johnson's problem, and that's going to be Zohran Mamdani's problem.
Don't bring Zohran Mamdani into this for no reason.
Up next, nearly 500 workers detained at a Hyundai plant in Georgia. Don't go anywhere. Take a look at this. A caravan of federal immigration officials rolled up to a massive Hyundai EV battery plant in Elabel, Georgia. That's about 20 minutes outside of Savannah on Thursday.
Now, nearly 500 workers were arrested. Most of them were South Korean citizens, and the majority of which did not work for Hyundai or its partner, LG Energy Solutions. Officials are calling it the largest ever Homeland Security enforcement operations at a single location. But the raid prompted some pushback from South Korean officials who said this on Friday.
The economic activities of our companies investing in the United States and the interests of our citizens must not be unduly violated during the course of U.S. law enforcement.
Meantime, reaction here at home was swift. Richard Stengel, a former undersecretary of state in the Obama administration, took to X saying, quote, "You impose tariffs on foreign government and pressure them to build a factory here, and then you arrest workers from that country who are constructing the factory. Does that seem like a good strategy?" And former gubernatorial candidate in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, also writing on X, "The raid at Bryan County Hyundai plant is a prime example of Trump's authoritarian playbook, weaponizing the power of government to terrorize working families, ripping communities apart, and creating a climate of fear."
Some are saying, however, this on the Hyundai situation. The X account for the Geiger Capital Substack posted this: Hyundai got billions of taxpayer dollars and huge tax incentives for this plant in Georgia because they promised good-paying jobs for local Americans. Instead, they hired hundreds of illegal immigrants. They need to face massive fines. Again, Hyundai has said that they did not employ any of those arrested. ICE has confirmed that the vast majority were employed by contractors and subcontractors hired to build the manufacturing plant. So the issue is, so they were on a visa situation as visitors, and my understanding of this, I was doing a little bit of research on this yesterday, is basically the terms of their visas, they can like consult on business projects, but are not supposed to be doing actual work. For that, you need a work visa, which at least some of the employees didn't have. So that is the argument, that they were not, what they were doing was not authorized. They didn't like sneak over the border or something. They're not violent criminals, so I don't like the way they're being treated. And I also think if we want to build plants, like, national conservative type people who I hear constantly that we got to bring manufacturing here, we got to reopen factories. Okay, and then you're going to arrest the people who are working in the factories? Like,
right.
This is not a serious industrial policy. If we can't build anything if you do this.
And Hyundai has a 2-decade history of investing in Georgia and bringing tons of jobs and money to that part.
Well,
of
when they're
the
given
country.
massive financial incentive to do so by government handouts, which I
And the
oppose.
company was also mandated to, and through conversation with President Trump, to invest $26 billion into the U.S. in the next few years. And part of that requires building the plant so that work can happen here. So when you're arresting people and also kind of intimidate, like poking the bear of an ally for no reason, we sent these people back to South Korea and their government had to jump in. It's like, well, that is not the violent criminals that you promised on the campaign trail to attack. And I think but there's bipartisan concern about the way that we're bothering working families or people trying to come here to help build up the U.S. economy. Because when you think about it, Anna Paulina Luna was on Joe Rogan's show, and he was like, I'm confused about this immigration policy. I think everyone, for the most part, that I spoke to, and I know there's no blanket poll that shows every single person on the same page, but most people agreed that violent criminals should leave the country. I think with this Hyundai plant, this was the example of targeting the wrong people that were actually doing the thing that you kind of insisted that Hyundai, as a non-American company, do to be conditioned.
The confusion is that President Trump and others in the MAGA coalition just want to deport, for the most part, violent criminals, and not necessarily everybody working in vital industries or restaurants or hotels or
But you always say that, but doesn't the buck stop with Trump?
But other people, including Stephen Miller, his principal immigration advisor, wants to deport literally every single person who is here illegally. All of them. They all got to. I mean,
but
you do this all the time.
Who's in
You all have to
charge,
go.
though? That's what I mean. Like, it should stop with Trump.
This goes to
He's
what I
like
was talking about on my radar. There's a genuine difference of opinion among relevant people under Trump, and they're vying to convince him, and he changes his mind about it somewhat, about who exactly should go.
And that's what I feel.
But there are a lot of conservatives that want these people to go. My answer to them is, how are we? Then they'll say, we got to build the factories with American labor. Like, if it was just as cost effective to do that, they would do that. They're doing, and again, this isn't Hyundai. This is the contractor to build the plant.
Right.
Now,
So
I utterly oppose corporate welfare and handouts, and I would not give them money to build this plant here. But then I also wouldn't tell them who they're going to employ. I wouldn't make it more difficult for them to build the plant by telling them exactly which labor pool they can draw on or exactly which resources they can use. No, you figure that out. The market will coordinate it, and I'm not going to bail you out and give you a government handout to do it. That's my policy, which I don't know if it's popular or not, but that's what I think should happen.
It's a little bit of cutting off your nose to spite your face. To me, he works with business owners around the globe, specifically people investing in the U.S. And
Trump.
Yes, President Trump, my apologies. So I don't understand how he would do this to business owners when he's himself used migrants to do certain laborious jobs. And so to me, it just doesn't make sense as a businessman to allow other people in your administration to make this decision when you know how deeply it affects most American businesses that are billion-dollar businesses like Hyundai. This is not an American business, but investing billions here.
Right. And do we want batteries built here or not? That's what I have to ask.
Coming up, how President Trump is breaking with the Constitution. Stick around.
Okay, Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Yeah, so when the framers of our government designed it, they built checks and balances for a reason, to make sure no one in the branch becomes too powerful. But Donald Trump has treated that system less like a guardrail and more like a speed bump. He's not just bending the rules, he's trampling Congress' constitutional authority. Time and time again, Trump has taken actions that bypass Congress entirely. He's launched military campaigns without authorization, he's withheld information from lawmakers, and even clawed back money Congress already approved. These aren't small slip-ups, they're full-on assaults on the separation of powers. Take national security. The Pentagon recently blocked Senator Mark Warner, the senior Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, from conducting oversight at a U.S. spy agency. That decision came after Laura Loomer, a far-right conspiracy theorist, criticized the meeting. Think about that. A sitting senator tasked with oversight was sidelined because of pressure from a fringe influencer. That's not how democracy is supposed to work. Or let's look at Venezuela. Armed forces launched a military campaign against alleged cartel members without notifying Congress, something past presidents, Democrat and Republican alike, made sure to do. Lawmakers say the lack of transparency fit a troubling pattern, the Trump administration simply ignoring the requirements to keep Congress in the loop on national security. And then there's money. Trump used a rare maneuver called, quote, pocket recession to cancel nearly $5 billion in congressionally approved foreign aid. Democrats cried foul, and even some Republicans questioned whether that was even legal. His heavy-handed use of the military has also drawn legal challenges. A federal judge ruled that his deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles was illegal. Washington, D.C. officials have now sued him for sending thousands of troops into the city without local consent. And now, as the president threatens to do the same thing in Chicago, even one of his supporters, Megyn Kelly, is saying out loud what constitutional scholars have been saying for months. Take a look.
You really can't do without the invitation of a governor. So we're heading for an uncomfortable showdown with Governor Pritzker.
The same goes for Iran. When Trump ordered strikes on nuclear facilities there, both Democrats and Republicans raised red flags. Take a look at House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' response.
Donald Trump and the administration chose to ignore the Constitution. And so they're going to have to come before Congress and explain their justification for an offensive military strike against Iran.
Even Republican Congressman Thomas Massie weighed in, saying the strikes were, quote, not constitutional. You see the pattern, but here's the bigger picture. Trump has already signed nearly 200 executive orders, even setting a record for the most in any president's first 100 days. Republicans, the same party that used to scream about executive overreach, have mostly stayed silent as Trump pretty much does whatever he wants. The truth is, the founders never intended for America to have an all-powerful president. They gave Congress the power of the purse, the power to declare war, and the responsibility to provide oversight. By sidelining Congress, Trump isn't just rewriting norms, he's rewriting the Constitution in practice. And the scariest part is that every time lawmakers shrug, it becomes harder to claw back that power. Congress was designed to check the president, not cheerlead for him. When it fails to do that, we don't just weaken a branch of government, we weaken the very system that's supposed to keep presidents honest. So I think I'm most surprised about the lack of pushback. Well, actually, no, we're seeing it now, just now about Venezuela. For a little while, people were quiet, and now J.D. Vance is forced to defend himself. But I think across the board, even with Megyn Kelly finally speaking out and saying this can't happen in Chicago, why are more Republicans who are anti-federal overreach not saying this is not what we do? I mean, historically, this is for decades. This is not what the party stands by. And I know Trump is an anomaly himself and always has been, but he still seemed to me to be aligned with certain pillars of the Republican Party. And this is really confusing, the way that he's doing whatever he wants, but also not having conversations about wanting to bomb a Venezuelan ship, about wanting to go into D.C. Like, these all could have been solved in the long term by addressing and coordinating with Congress and local officials in some cases, but he's just kind of skipping those steps and putting executive orders in place or calling it a state of emergency. And I don't think that type of solution is ever long term.
Well, I can answer your question. The thinking of Trump and Republicans on, like, you know, why aren't they keeping to their exact principles, opposing federal overreach, those kinds of things? I know what their thinking is. Their thinking is, well, Democrats don't care about federal overreach whatsoever. When they're in power, they'll engage in all sorts of federal overreaches. The federal government ordered state and local officials to put biological men in women's sports. So if they're going to do whatever they want, we're not going to play by a different set of rules. We're not going to have our hands tied behind our backs. We're going to do the same to bring about conservative policy. That is their thinking. You can say that thinking is wrong, or it's philosophically wrong, but that is their strategic thinking, is that conservatives, Republicans, the Trump administration, the MAGA movement will not hobble itself if Democrats are going to do whatever they want when they take power.
But I remember when we talked about, like, the big beautiful bill, because, I mean, or even not even the big beautiful bill, when we talked about everything that was being done by DOJ and how everything was an executive order, everything was just immediate and lots of changes were made, but they couldn't be permanent. And Marjorie Taylor Greene argued this unless Congress does something about it. Why are we not starting with Congress is what I'm saying, for President Trump to actually implement these things long term, even. Yeah, but it's still a Republican majority. So if there's a time to get something done, people always criticize Obama when he was president. He had a Democratic majority. It's like, okay, then why didn't you do everything? Why didn't you codify?
He had a Democratic supermajority briefly.
Right, and why didn't you codify Roe v. Wade? Why didn't all these conversations about what happened since then?
Bet it all
there's
on
so
healthcare.
many, exactly, but there's so much that people can do, and I'm critical on both sides. It's like, well, if you have the majority and you actually want to get things done, push it through Congress. I mean, like we saw with the big beautiful bill, they got it done with much contention, but it still was done. And now we'll see how it plays out for America. But what I think is that President Trump likes to skip constantly over Congress, and that's not a winning solution or a long-term solution. It's just what I'm not understanding from a party that has power in Congress, why you would skip over it so often.
I mean, they have power in Congress. They don't have a supermajority in the Senate. So technically, you could have the filibuster thwarting things they're trying to do. Now, I would argue that they should still do that anyway, and then if Democrats step forth, filibuster it, prevent it from happening, at worst, I mean, frankly, at worst, you can just do it anyway for the executive order the way they're doing it now, and they can say, well, Democrats obstructed us, and you got to vote, you, the American people, look at what the Democrats are doing. They don't want our cities put in order. They don't want immigration dealt with. They don't want any of our problems fixed. You have to vote them out of office to put more Republicans in so we can do it congressionally. They could make that argument if they try to do it the congressional route, so I would argue to them that they should.
And I think, there's a conversation about the midterms coming up, so people actually can see what people want. So if President Trump pushes stuff through Congress, like the big, beautiful bill, which is very unpopular, then people have a decision to make. Well, if my congressperson voted for this bill and they're up on the ballot again in the midterms, either they're staying or they're going. And if more legislation comes through like that and American people are not satisfied in the next year with how it's playing out for them personally, then they have an option to make. And I think if they're not satisfied with Democrats not supporting some of this legislation, then they also have an option. And I think that is when America runs best, when the people have a say-so. I mean, if people feel like what he's doing is too much overreach, because a lot of people believed in immigration, but like most polls show around 50% or higher think what he's doing or the way he's going about it is too harsh. Let Congress come up with the solution in America. Vote on it, push it forward. I mean, we've tried to do that for decades, and he blocked it from happening when it was almost successful when Biden was president, just because he didn't want Biden to get a win. He played the political game, and now we don't have a long-term immigration solution.
I mean, of all the things Trump is doing, I am most confident what he's doing on immigration is broadly popular, whether I agree with it or not. I don't think this is as close to his policy. Also, immigration is national policy, so there's less wiggle room to just let the states do whatever they want on that. Arizona and Texas don't have to get. They can't have separate immigration policies. This has already been litigated at the Supreme Court level. So he's doing what he's going to do. On the other stuff, starting wars, regime change, Iran, that kind of thing. Those are issues where, and even the, Chicago or whatever, the base wants you to play to the base. We know what the base wants.
Now, President Trump is breaking from RFK Jr. on a hot button issue. Find out what he said next.
Now, it's just days after HHS Secretary RFK Jr.'s fiery Senate hearing, and President Trump appears to be changing his tune on some of Kennedy's stances. It all comes as Kennedy has faced widespread criticism for his new vaccine mandates and CDC staffing overhaul. Let's take a look at what Trump had to say.
You have some vaccines that are so amazing. The polio vaccine, I happen to think, is amazing. A lot of people think that COVID is amazing. There are many people that believe strongly in that. But you have some vaccines that are so incredible. And I think you have to be very careful when you say that some people don't have to be vaccinated. It's a very tough position. You have vaccines that work. They just pure and simple work. They're not controversial at all. And I think those vaccines should be used. Otherwise, some people are going to catch it and they endanger other people.
Now, as a reminder, Trump was singing Kennedy's praises just days ago. Let's take a look.
Well, I didn't get to watch the hearings today, but he's a very good person. And he means very well, and he's got some little different ideas. It's not your standard. It's not your standard talk, I would say, and that has to do with medical and vaccines. But if you look at what's going on in the world with health, and look at this country also with regard to health, I like the fact that he's different.
Meanwhile, family drama abound. Not all is sunshine and rainbows in the house of Kennedy. RFK Jr.'s sister and nephew are calling for the secretary to resign. His sister Carrie writes, quote, "I stand with the many courageous individuals in the medical and scientific communities who have had to set aside their vital work to speak truth to power to keep the public safe. Enough is enough. Secretary Kennedy must resign now." Then his nephew, Joe, says, quote, "Robert Kennedy Jr. is a threat to health and well-being of every American. The challenges before us, from disease outbreaks to mental health crisis, demand moral clarity, scientific expertise, and leadership rooted in fact. Those values are not present in the secretary's office. He must resign."
Despite the critics, September will be a big month for Kennedy. The secretary is poised to make even more moves, including delivery of a report on the environmental causes of autism. And mark your calendars for the 18th. His handpicked vaccine advisory committee will also meet on the availability of the COVID boosters. No one cares what his family has to say at all.
I would be concerned if your siblings were writing in to get Robby off air.
All that makes
I would be concerned.
Think ill of them. You couldn't get me to denounce my siblings publicly, even if they were doing like truly vile things.
Well,
I think some loyalty to your family is a admirable quality, and no one cares about them.
They maybe want people to be safe and healthy. He is an anti-vaxxer who came in and got confirmed. He is. He wants to take away the options for people to get COVID vaccine today if they want to even. And that's a problem for people that still want to get it and are in families that have autoimmune diseases and other things. He's not making it readily available to all people because that's something that he wants to do.
If I think not everyone right now should be given penicillin immediately, am I anti?
But it's not what he thinks. The problem is that he's
No.
leading off ideologies and not scientific research. So even President Trump during Operation Warp Speed, which he supported the vaccine and called it a, quote, medical miracle during that time. So President Trump liked the vaccine.
Trump said there.
He said also, quote, it saved millions of lives. The Pfizer CEO said Trump, which I disagree with, should get the Nobel Peace Prize because of Operation Warp Speed.
You should get the Nobel Peace Prize for many different reasons. Yes.
Okay, that's a bit of a reach, but I said, this is what the Pfizer CEO said. Don't quote me for that. All I'm saying is that President Trump supported the vaccine. RFK obviously does not and doesn't want it readily available for people that have the option. You love options, people who like to take a vaccine whether they want to. And I think the overall thought that RFK is instilling this notion that vaccines maybe, and the overall sentiments that he has that are instilling this notion that vaccines are not necessary anymore. We're seeing less people get vaccines. People are actively in certain states deciding that they want to find the exception.
Lindsey, don't you understand that if you march into a doctor's office or the emergency room, you say, and give me penicillin right now, they won't just give it to you. They'll be like, well, are you sick? They'll do tests to find out if you have an infection that can be treated with that thing. The COVID boosters, according to medical experts, not according to cranks that only RFK Jr. listens to, but medical experts, is not necessarily medically necessary for otherwise healthy young people and children. So there's going to be some conversation about who gets it and who's paying for it and whether they should. And you can still get it if you ask a doctor.
And when you take away all the money for the research,
we're not taking it away from other people.
Yeah, but from the CDC. So when you're taking away money for important research, well, then you're in a situation where if a pandemic, God forbid, ever does happen again, now we have not spent money on preparing for it.
Maybe
and so we're in the same situation that you hated so much.
$18 it made off the COVID vaccine and do a little bit of its own research.
Okay, well, we're going to start having some measles pop back up like we've already seen, and we're going to start having very preventable diseases because the more anti-vax sentiment goes across our country and leaders kind of support that loosely and say that they really don't, but they are.
He said he wrote an op-ed saying it's a good choice.
It was eradicated in this country, but then it's also there's people like the Surgeon General in Florida who are suggesting that they want to get rid of mandatory vaccinations throughout the entire state, which is ridiculous. And so when you get into a situation like this now, if RFK is the leader, somebody who has been openly anti-vax historically, who changed their tune just to get a position, well, now we're in a situation where people are empowered and emboldened to go against science and put us in a position where teachers and kids and people with autoimmune disease and who are vulnerable in schools are talking about polio, measles, mumps, and rubella again because this looks like an option and a conversation that's about options rather than science and research.
Yeah, I think as Trump said, there are a lot of potential issues with letting families opt out of, for instance, the measles vaccine if their kids are going to public schools. I am generally for letting families decide medical decisions and not having the government overrule them. So this is, as Trump said, this is a difficult case because there's a potential harm to others if you're, again, in the public school.
Right.
If you're being homeschooled or you're in some private school, it should be whatever the policy is of the private school. I would not require it of you. In the public school, well, then they can have a rule that says you're going to do that.
Okay, but for the party that's very family first, which is the Republican Party, what's the consensus here? So in Texas, a 6-year-old did not get the measles shot because their parents didn't want them to, right? I guess you can call them anti-vax. That kid died because he contracted measles. I mean, she contracted measles. So then when you think about that story that just happened in Texas earlier this year, I believe it was around March, then you're putting a life in danger, somebody who's not have the maturity to make that type of life or death decision for themselves because they're 6 years old.
Okay, but what about the opposite case where the government said you have to get the COVID vaccine, even though we now know for that child, there is little medical reason to do so.
I gave you an
And
exact example of somebody. No, I don't want a potential. I gave you an exact example of someone who died from a disease that was largely eradicated in our country because their parents made a choice.
I mean, I don't.
COVID vaccines saved lives.
This
Your
is a
president
big country,
called
and
it
I'm not gonna
a medical
agree.
miracle.
I'm not going to agree with the choices that every individual or every family makes all over the country. We're all different, and generally speaking, it's not any of my business, Lindsey. You do you, and I do me, and that's the way we should live side by side.
Yeah, but not only did that kid's parents put other people at risk and at danger for contracting measles, they also allowed their kid to pass away and then stood by their decision. Like they would go back and not give her the shot again. And so to me, that's wild to be a parent's choice rather than a mandated thing that we know historically for decades has protected people.
I don't trust the government to make this choice better in the aggregate than families, even though that family clearly made the wrong choice. And I gave you my answer for the public schools. I would say then yes, then the school gets to require it. So sad things are going to happen when you live in a free country and you don't just leave it up to centralized authority figures to tell us everything to do. But my proposition is that fewer sad things happen than when you live under authoritarianism and they lock you in your homes to stop the spread of a
But
disease.
RFK is getting reeled out by both sides. We saw that hearing, and that was a disaster for RFK, who sat there looking like a scolded child because both Republicans and Democrats were coming at him.
That's not the way I heard it.
I mean, what I was watching was people directly asking him, what's your plan? You're providing chaos. You're firing people that you begged us to help get a job running the CDC, and then a couple weeks later they're gone. Like, you're completely all over the place. So when you have his sister speaking up and saying he needs to get out of here, yeah, because you're providing chaos when people need guidance.
No one cares what anyone with the last name Kennedy has to say other than RFK Jr. Sorry, that's the truth. Up next, a viral moment at a Friday night baseball game sparked outrage online. You probably saw it, everybody did. What people are saying about the woman who's known as the Phillies Karen. That's up next. An altercation at a baseball game between the Miami Marlins and the Philadelphia Phillies lit up the internet over the weekend. The Phillies' Harrison Bader hit a home run in the fourth inning, and several fans chased after the home run ball in the stands.
Now, a man by the name of Drew Feltwell secured the ball and gave it to his son. But moments later, you can see another woman wearing a Phillies jersey went up to Feltwell and appeared to demand that he give her the ball instead. This post comes from the Phillies after the game. The team was able to track down Feltwell and his family, and Harrison Bader gave the kid a signed bat.
Oh, isn't that nice? Well, the incident quickly went viral with the internet condemning the woman who's been dubbed Phillies Karen. Ohio Senator John Husted weighed in on X, saying in the end she got the baseball and national humiliation. The boy got the behind-the-scenes visit with the Phillies, a bat, and a great story to tell for the rest of his life. Who is having the better day today? Some people even took issue, though, with Feltwell, the dad, saying he should have refused to give the ball to the woman. Conservative commentator Matt Walsh writes, "Cowering to a bully in front of your son is just about the worst example you can possibly set." That was actually a common reaction I saw from some conservatives. Jack Posobiec said the same thing. I very much disagree with that take, and here is why. So obviously the woman is awful, and I mean,
I was hoping that you weren't like,
no,
it's
I'm
her
not,
ball.
No.
I was like, Robby, I'm going to have to.
I mean, I feel bad for the amount of hate she's going to get at this point. I mean, again, I've said this before. No one
don't like bullying online.
I don't like online.
Okay.
If you record someone in a bad moment and they just have the internet shrieking at them for the rest of their lives, it's not great. Her conduct was obviously bad, and she deserves some shaming for it, but it's never proportionate.
I think she deserves the Game of Thrones. Shame.
Well, that's what she's getting. But in terms of him, like, not giving her the ball, no. He did that correctly because you're on camera. Even if he was justified, he shouldn't have had to give her the ball. But your duty there as a man, honestly,
yes,
is to de-escalate, not get in some match with this woman who you're outmatching her. Your cameras are rolling. You could suffer. If you raise your voice, you could lose your job. You got to put food on your kid's table more so than you got to give him that baseball. So de-escalating, handing over the ball was the correct thing to do because it was not going to make a situation worse and get him in trouble with cameras rolling. Like, they're acting like he should have, backhanded her like it was the 1950s. Like, you listen here, lady. Like, it's not. Then he was going to be charged with assault and lose his job. So no, he did the right thing, and the outcome was good for him and the family, and that's good.
Yeah, I agree. Like, my most Oprah self can say, yes, I would have been handed over the ball and said, oh, you're childish, take it. But in real life, it's like, you're taking something away from my child. No, move away from me. And I guess he didn't have to get into a whole screaming match with her, because I actually, like you said, don't like when men engage with an argument with a woman. Just walk away, because the optics, especially, even if the woman.
I mean, he couldn't walk away. She walked over to his seat.
Yeah,
and also,
but
I don't. Now he walked over to her area to get the ball. And I don't know. You know, our viewers know I'm not the big. I'm not the biggest sports guy, and even among sports, baseball is like no for me, big no. So I don't know what the normal ball catching etiquette in the stands is if you're not like supposed to leave your area. I don't know. I don't know how it works.
Okay, but let me tell you life etiquette. It was the child's birthday. Give him the ball. Because what are you going to do? Go put the ball in a glass case and go home and just stare at it and be like, oh, this is the ball I stole from a little kid.
I like the videos where like where there's all these videos with little kids trying to get the ball and somebody else, usually a tall dude, catches it and goes, and then hands over the ball to the kid. I like that.
That's better. I just can't imagine what this grown adult woman is going to do with this ball that she knows she took from a child. Like, it doesn't deserve public humiliation for the rest of her life or losing a job, but it is very petty and just shows you the degree to which people actually have no I care for other people. They don't like stealing from a child, but I'm happy on his birthday he was able to meet the players, go behind the scenes, and have a much better day. But I also understand people who are going to have a normal human reaction. They got something for their kid, they ran across the stands to get it, and says no. I mean, I don't know if I was standing there that I would have been like, okay, girl, you got it. I don't feel like arguing in front of my kid. I would be like, no, now what? And so then if she hits me, it's assault, right? I'm just gonna chill.
You hit anyone, it's assault.
That's what I mean. That's if anybody, like if the guy got hit, then she's on camera. What's she gonna do next? But I guess you're at a game. You're gonna ruin the whole game.
I mean, you know there are cameras at a game. This is different than just like a parking lot. It's like you know that the Coldplay couple found that out, right? The cameras.
There's cameras in stadiums.
I find baseball more boring than watching paint dry. I would not.
I actually have ran after a ball in the stands.
Have you?
Yeah, I used to live in Arizona. You know, a lot of spring training happens there. And I ran down the stands. And I actually equally don't know baseball. But it was important to me to catch the ball. But I did not steal it from a little kid. I'm just competitive in that way.
Well, we have a lovely baseball stadium in Washington, D.C. I live quite by Nationals Park.
Are you inviting me to a game?
No, I'm not going to go to a game. I've been there for other reasons. I've been there for events and concerts. It's very nice. All right, that does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.